She thinks that state courts actually have something to learn from tribal courts, because one thing she says is that tribal courts understand that when a criminal defendant is in front of that court, that person is always going to be a member of that community. And so how they mete out justice and how they punish that person needs to be done so in the context that that person is a part of that community.
Hi, I'm Scott Leadingham. Thanks for joining us here in the unique Northwest. Today we're joined by Austin Jenkins, Olympia correspondent. Thanks for joining us today, Austin.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to be talking with Austin about some updates in state government and other issues going around. And first, Matt Shea. He is a Republican state representative from the Spokane Valley, not the city of Spokane. He's also known for wanting to secede from Washington state and have Eastern Washington create its own state of liberty. He is the subject of a new report out amongst the House, and it is going to recommend some things about him and his actions. Austin is here to tell us a little bit about it more. And Austin, the report, as we film this, has not yet been made public. So we're not going to talk about what's in the report, but more about how it came to be. So Austin, how did this report came to be?
So this was a formal investigation that was launched by the State House of Representatives. The Chief Clerk's Office signed a contract back in July, at the end of July, with a firm, an investigation firm that's led by a former FBI agent. And this firm was asked to investigate Representative Matt Shea. This came about because last spring there was a series of media reports in The Guardian and other news organizations reporting that Representative Shea had used a private messaging app to discuss spying on political opponents. Now, at the time, Shea called the article that was in The Guardian an extremely misleading hit piece, but it prompted an outcry. There was a letter that all of the House Democrats wrote and signed and sent to the House Republicans that said that Shea's involvement in, quote, extreme activities was eroding the state's ideals of fairness and equality. And it was then that the House leadership decided to investigate and to look into his connections to far-right groups.
Okay, like I said, as we tape this, the report has not yet been made public. People can look at our website, nwpb.org, for updates. Although, remind us, what could come about because of this report? Could he be expelled from the House of Representatives by his fellow lawmakers?
That's an avenue, an option for the House. Certainly we're not there yet. The investigators were tasked with determining whether Representative Shea has engaged in, planned, or promoted political violence. These investigators were also asked to try to gauge his connection to, his involvement with groups that perhaps are promoting political violence. And then they were also asked to try to determine if groups that he is associated with in some way or another pose an actual threat, what their threat level would be. So we're waiting to see, what the findings are in this several months long investigation. Now, if there are findings that the House thinks are actionable, I think there's sort of three options that could happen. One is that House Republicans could sanction Shea. There could be restrictions that would be placed on him by his own caucus. It's conceivable the House would vote to censure him. And then sort of at the most extreme end of things, there could be a vote to expel him from the chamber, but that would require a 2/3 vote of the chamber, a hard-to-get vote. And again, it's just way too early to say whether that would even be on the table because we don't know what these investigators found. For that matter, this report could exonerate Representative Shea. We just don't know. And he hasn't been saying much. He's been very kind of not commenting to the media, not responding to requests for comment. At times he goes on Facebook Live and defends himself. He has people who will vouch for him in the media, but he's really been hard to reach in recent months when reporters try to get in touch with him.
Move over from the State House of Representatives over still in Olympia, though, to the State Supreme Court. A lot of changes going on there. State Supreme Court Chief Justice Mary Fairhurst is stepping down due to health reasons, and so she will be replaced with a new Chief Justice, and then someone else will be appointed by Governor Jay Inslee. In fact, that appointment just happened. Tell us more about some of the changes going on in the Supreme Court.
Right. So Chief Justice Mary Fairhurst is battling her third bout of colon cancer, and she's worked through her previous cancer fights. Recently, she's been working while undergoing chemotherapy, but in October, she sent a letter to the governor announcing that she would step down in January, feeling that she just can't give the court the attention and energy and effort that it deserves, and so she'll step down. Justice Deborah Stevens, who originally hails from Spokane, has been selected to be the next Chief Justice. She'll be sworn into that position on January 6th. Meanwhile, Governor Jay Inslee has now appointed a replacement for Justice Mary Fairhurst, and that person is Whatcom County Superior Court Judge Raquel Montoya-Lewis, who it appears will be the first Native American to serve as a justice on the Supreme Court since its founding in 1889. Also, she will be only the second Native American Supreme Court justice in the nation. So she will also be sworn in on January 6th, and then she'll have to run for election in 2020 when Justice Fairhurst's term finishes up.
Right, so for the time being, first Native American person appointed to the state Supreme Court, but in the meantime, of course, that means, like you said, there'll be an election eventually, and we'll see who permanently fills that seat. But as any judicial appointment involves, that talks about a lot about how they will rule, some of those things. So how will this sort of shift lately in both the new Supreme Court Chief Justice and this person filling the new role? How is that maybe expected to affect some of the dynamics of the court, some of the rulings in the things that you cover?
Joel Connolly, writing in the SeattlePI.com, recently described this court as a progressive court. It is a mostly female court. It's one of 10 or 11 courts nationwide with a majority of female justices. It's a court that has a Latino justice, an openly gay Asian American justice, and now the first Native American justice. So it's a diverse court, increasingly so. It is a court that seems to trend to the more liberal or progressive. It's also a court where it's not unusual to see split decisions. They're not always unanimous. They're not always seeing eye to eye. I think specific to the new Justice, Judge Montoya-Lewis, she has an interesting perspective and background. She's been a tribal judge. She has a Master of Social Work, and she said that she brings that view of systems and how people might arrive before her in a courtroom, kind of understanding their path and their journey and how systems may have failed them and why that might have contributed to the fact that they're now in a court of law. She thinks that state courts actually have something to learn from tribal courts, because one thing she says is that tribal courts understand that when a criminal defendant is in front of that court, that person is always going to be a member of that community. And so how they mete out justice and how they punish that person needs to be done so in the context that that person is a part of that community. She also said that, with technology changing as quickly as it is, it's important that judges be up with technology, especially in the context of things like search warrants, where police are now going to judges requesting search warrants for people's phones and digital data. And so she says that raises issues that require judges to be very aware of technology. So I think what you're going to see in this new justice is a very interesting and unique perspective, both because she's a Native American, and because she has this social work background, and because she's thinking a lot about how technology is affecting the court system and law enforcement.
All right, one of the things that the state Supreme Court very much could rule on in the near future is Initiative 976, the $30 car tabs measure that's been working its way through the court since voters passed it recently. We're going to step aside from the legal analysis of all that's playing out. That's for another time. But of course, the person behind I-976 is Tim Eyman, who many people know as the perennial ballot initiative sponsor. He makes his living off of that. And many of the things that he has brought to voters, and they have either passed or declined, have come before courts. And he has his own track record of his initiatives being challenged and he himself being sued in court. Just kind of give us a brief overview of Tim Eyman's history with the Washington State judicial system.
It's true that over the last 20 years, there's been almost a Tim Eyman initiative per year. He sponsors a lot that don't ever qualify. Many have qualified and gotten on the ballot. Some have passed, others have been defeated. Many have been challenged in court, often successfully, with either where they're thrown out in their entirety or portions are thrown out. And then there have also been times when a Tim Eyman initiative is found unconstitutional and the state legislature comes back and reenacts the policy because it's popular with voters. It remains to be seen what happens with Initiative 976, but we've seen this movie before where an initiative of his passes and then there's a legal challenge to it. That's not surprising. What's perhaps different now is he's in the media a lot. He's very fired up about this. He's saying that this is sort of an abomination, and that the city of Seattle, for instance, is going against the will of voters. Of course, Garfield County, which is not the city of Seattle, is also part of the litigation to challenge I-976. This, as I say, we've seen this movie before. Not surprising or unusual to see a Tim Eyman initiative challenged in the courts. We shall see what happens, but he's certainly positioning himself for a perhaps higher profile role in state politics.
Well, right, and as you say that, good transition, because it's not all about personality, but with Tim Eyman, he is a very big personality, and he doesn't run from the spotlight, he doesn't run from the media, he embraces it, and he is also now running for governor. He says he is going to run as an independent, not as a Democrat or a Republican, and it would seem on the surface that that would benefit one side or the other whenever there's a third-party candidate involved, and maybe that could help or hinder Republican candidates who are running against Governor Jay Inslee in his bid for a third term. So from your perspective, what does it seem like right now that him running as an independent could help or hinder Republicans?
Yeah, so this was, perhaps a surprise announcement from him, because he's always been worked outside of elected office to influence government and taxation, and now he's saying he's running for office. And the other thing that's kind of unusual is that Governor Inslee is seeking a third term, which we don't often see. Usually governors in this state self-term limit. The interesting piece of this is that Tim Eyman has tremendous name recognition statewide, and the Republicans who've so far announced to run for governor do not have statewide name recognition. There's a state senator, there's a former mayor from north of Seattle, there's a police chief from Northeast Washington. So in our top two primary environment, where the top two vote getters, regardless of party, advance to the general election, if you held that primary today, it wouldn't be terribly surprising if Jay Inslee and Tim Eyman were the top two vote getters, which is sort of stunning to think about. An independent candidate, Tim Eyman, who's certainly an out-of-the-box, not traditional candidate, and certainly to have Republicans not be able to compete in a top two primary for governor would be a pretty remarkable situation. What Republicans are saying, though, is, look, the primary is still many months off. There's time for their candidates to gain some notoriety, some name recognition, and some traction. It's early yet. But I'll tell you, Scott, I would not be totally surprised if come next August, after we see the primary results, it's an Inslee versus Eyman contest. Of course, a lot could happen between now and then.
Of course, a lot could happen. A skeptical view, though, of his run, and I've seen this, just people kind of speculating about it, is not so much that he's doing it because he actually wants to be governor, but that he is trying to raise money for himself and his cause and his legal bills. He has, as we mentioned, he has a lot of legal fees from the various cases over the years. I just wonder, in any way, has that registered in some of the things that you've covered? Is that the type of maybe cynical or skeptical view of his run is not really one of substance, but one, again, to help himself in his legal fees?
You certainly never know what's in someone's heart or mind. He is running at an interesting time because, in addition to having his initiative challenged, he's also in the midst of a campaign finance lawsuit that was brought by the Attorney General. He's been held in contempt of court. He's filed a bankruptcy and said that the Attorney General has forced him into bankruptcy. He says this has cost him his marriage, and he has been raising money for a legal defense fund. Now, if he's raising money for his governor's race, he can't use those dollars to fund his legal battle. He could potentially, though, and this was pointed out in an article by Melissa Santos in Crosscut, you can use campaign funds to replace wages lost because you were out campaigning for public office. So for someone who is a full-time initiative sponsor, who's now not running initiatives, but is instead running for the office of governor, potentially he could use campaign funds to pay himself for those lost wages. What his motivations are whether he's going to stay in this till the end, whether he's a serious candidate, all are questions that have been asked, all questions that are hard to answer at this point. But this is a pretty surprising and unique situation. And the reality is he could be running for governor next July while he is on trial in a civil trial over this campaign finance allegations, and the allegation there that he took kickbacks from a signature gathering firm. He could go on trial, again, a civil trial for this in the midst of the campaign. So it'll be very interesting to watch and see what happens.
It certainly will, and we thank you, Austin, for helping to share it with us now, and we look forward to your coverage of it down the road. Austin Jenkins, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You can read more of Austin's reporting on these and other topics at nwpb.org. Thank you for joining us here in the unique Northwest.